Welcome to Depression, a first-person journey. My name is G. I want to start with the feeling before I get to the story, because the feeling is what finally cracked this open for me, and I think it might be what cracks it open for someone listening. The feeling is exhaustion, not the kind that comes from working hard or sleeping too little or pushing through a difficult season. A different kind, deeper. The kind that lives in a place that rest does not reach. The kind that is still there in the morning, even after a full night of sleep. The kind that does not have a clear cause you can point to and address, because the cause is not a single thing. It is the accumulated weight of decades of something you did not even know you were doing. I have been tired in that particular way for longer than I realized. I know that now. What I did not know, what therapy has been slowly, uncomfortably revealing, is what I was so tired from. I was tired from performing, from maintaining, from being one version of myself in one room and a different version in the next, and keeping track of which version was required where, and never fully putting any of them down, because putting them down felt more dangerous than carrying them. I was tired from wearing masks. Not one, several. Each one built for a specific environment, each one serving a specific purpose, each one so practiced and so refined over so many years that I had stopped being able to tell where the mask ended and where I began. This episode is about those masks, where they came from, what they were made of, what they cost me, and what is slowly, tentatively beginning to emerge now that I am finally, for the first time in my adult life, willing to put them down long enough to find out what is underneath. Nobody sits down and decides to construct a false version of themselves. That is not how it happens. It happens the way most things that shape us happen, gradually, in increments, in response to an environment that is giving you clear and consistent feedback about which version of you it has room for. It starts in childhood, in the house I described in the last 2 episodes, in a home where emotional expression had limited safe outlets, and where the way you presented yourself had real consequences for how you were received. You learn quickly, through experience, what gets rewarded and what gets dismissed. What makes the room easier and what makes it harder. What version of yourself keeps things smooth and what version invites friction. And you adapt. Because adaptation is what children do. It is one of the most remarkable and most costly things about human development, the capability to reshape yourself to fit the environment you are placed in. This is quite remarkable because it is how children survive environments that are not always designed for their flourishing. And it is costly because the reshaping does not stop when the environment changes. The adapted version becomes the default. The mask becomes the face. And by the time I was going through adolescence, school, peers, the expanding world beyond my front door, the mask was already well under construction, and the world outside my home did not disrupt that construction. It reinforced it, because the world outside had its own set of rules about who a young man was supposed to be, its own rewards and its own penalties. And I was a fast learner. I built what worked, what got me through, what kept me safe in a world that had very little patience for a boy who was carrying more than anyone around him knew. The first mask, the one I wore in professional spaces, in rooms where what I had accomplished was the primary currency, was the achiever. This one was the most polished, the most practiced, the most seamlessly maintained because it had the most external validation attached to it. When you achieve, the world responds. People take notice. Doors open. A kind of respect arrives that does not ask questions about what is going on beneath the surface. That was exactly what I needed the mask to do. This achiever mask said everything through results. It did not need to be vulnerable because the work spoke loudly enough to drown out any questions about the man doing it. It did not need to ask for help because asking for help would have introduced a crack in the image of capability that the mask depended on. It did not need to fail visibly, because visible failure would have undermined the entire premise, that this was a man who had it together, who produced, who delivered, whose worth was self-evident in what he had built. What nobody could see was that the mask was specifically designed to prevent anyone from seeing the anxiety underneath it. The fear that the next thing would be the thing that exposed the gap between what I was presenting and what I actually felt inside. The relentless internal pressure of a man who could not rest because resting meant the output stopped, and if the output stopped, the worth stopped with it. Achievement felt like existing. That is the most honest way I know to say it. Not like living, not like thriving, like existing. Like justifying my presence in a room, like proving, one accomplishment at a time, that I had earned the right to take up space. Therapy has been slowly dismantling the logic of that, asking me to sit with the uncomfortable question of what I am worth when I am not producing anything. When the output is zero and the room is quiet and there is nothing to point to as evidence of value. I do not have a clean answer to that question yet. But the fact that I can ask it without immediately redirecting to the next thing I need to accomplish is itself a form of progress, even if it has been slow progress. The second mask was the one I wore in social spaces, among friends, in groups, in any environment where connection was the currency rather than achievement. And this one, if I am honest, was the most enjoyable to wear, which also made it the most dangerous. The entertainer was charming, quick, funny in a way that made rooms lighter and people drawn in. He could read a group and find the tone and deliver exactly what the moment needed. He was the person people wanted at the table, the one whose presence raised the energy, the one who made things easier and more enjoyable simply by showing up. And underneath all of that warmth and humor and social ease was a man using every bit of it to make absolutely sure nobody got close enough to see what was actually happening inside him. Humor is one of the most effective deflection tools available to a person who does not want to be known too deeply. It moves the energy outward. It creates connection on the surface while maintaining distance at the core. When things get too serious, too probing, too close to something real, a well-timed joke redirects everything. The moment passes. The conversation moves on. The mask stays intact. I became a master of that redirection, of keeping interactions warm and engaging and genuinely enjoyable while never quite crossing the threshold into real depth. Into the kind of conversation where someone might actually see the fear or the sadness or the confusion that the entertainer mask was specifically built to keep out of sight. The cost of wearing this mask is a particular kind of loneliness that is hard to explain to someone who has not experienced it. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who like you without anyone truly knowing you, of being genuinely connected on the surface while being completely alone on the inside, of performing warmth so consistently that warmth itself starts to feel hollow because it is always outward-facing and never genuinely received. I have a lot of people in my life who would tell you they know me well. I am not sure how many of them have ever seen the man behind the entertainer. I am not sure I have fully let that man exist in front of another person yet. That is one of the things I am working toward. Slowly, with more resistance than I expected. The third mask was the one I wore closest to home, the most intimate one. The one that was in some ways the costliest because it operated in the space where being myself should have been safest and where the gap between the mask and the reality was therefore the most damaging. The provider and protector never showed weakness. He was the stable one, the capable one, the one who handled things so that the people around him did not have to worry. He brought home what was needed. He solved what needed solving. He stood between the people he loved and whatever in the environment could cause them harm. I learned that version of manhood directly from my father. And I want to be careful here because I am not saying my father's example was wrong. It was not. His provision and his protection were real, and they were gifts, and I carry them with deep gratitude. But what I absorbed from his example, filtered through my own wounds and my own fears, and my own need to maintain control, was a version of it that had no inner dimension. It was all output and no input, all giving and no receiving, all strength and no admission of the places where the strength ran out. The provider and protector mask said to the people closest to me, "I am fine. I am handling it. You do not need to worry about me." And because I maintained that message so consistently and so convincingly, the people who loved me believed it. They had to. I gave them nothing else to work with. What that meant in practice was that the person in my life who most deserved my full self, the unmanaged, unperforming, genuinely present version of me, was receiving a mask instead. A high-functioning, well-intentioned, deeply committed mask. But a mask nonetheless. And you cannot truly connect with a mask. You cannot reach the person behind it, no matter how hard you try. You cannot love someone into being themselves. They have to choose it. I did not choose it for a very long time, and the cost of that choice, to the people I love and to myself, is something I am still in the process of fully accounting for. Here is something I did not anticipate discovering when I began this work. The three masks, the achiever, the entertainer, the provider, and protector, were not entirely separate constructions. They were variations. Three different expressions of the same core belief. And that belief was this: the real me is not enough. The actual person, with his fears and his sadness and his unprocessed grief and his complicated history and his genuine needs, is not something the world can accept or accommodate or receive. So, I will give the world a version it can use, a version it will respond to positively, a version that asks nothing difficult in return and reveals nothing that could be used against me. Three masks, one wound underneath all of them. The cost of maintaining that across decades and across different spaces was immense in ways I am still calculating. The cognitive load of it alone, the tracking of which version was required where, the management of what had been said to whom, the constant vigilance about whether the mask was holding, was exhausting in exactly the way I described at the beginning of this episode, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. But the deeper cost was in the relationships, because every relationship I have ever had has been, to some degree, a relationship with a version of me rather than with me. And there is a grief in that, a quiet, persistent grief when you finally begin to see it clearly. The grief of connection that was real on the surface and limited at the core, of being genuinely liked and genuinely cared for by people who did not have access to the full picture, of having been present in rooms and conversations and intimate moments while a significant part of what was actually true about me was somewhere else entirely. That grief is part of what I am sitting with now. I want to be honest about where I am in this process because I think honesty is more useful than a tidy narrative of discovery. I am still wearing the masks, not as unconsciously as before. The work I have been doing has created enough awareness that I can sometimes catch myself mid-performance and recognize what is happening. But awareness of a pattern and freedom from a pattern are not the same thing. I can see the mask now in a way I could not before. I have not yet fully learned how to take it off. What therapy is showing me underneath, in the glimpses I get when the mask slips or when I am willing to set it down for a moment in the safety of that room, is something I did not expect. I expected to find damage, disorder, the wreckage of a man who had been suppressing and performing for so long that there was nothing coherent left beneath the surface. But that is not what is there. What is there is someone much quieter than the masks, someone who is genuinely curious about things, who has a warmth that does not need performance to sustain him, someone who has opinions and preferences and a specific way of seeing the world that has never fully been given room to exist because it was always being managed into something more presentable. But there is also pain there, old pain, the kind that has been waiting a long time for someone to finally turn toward it rather than construct another layer of performance on top of it. And I am learning, very slowly, with a great deal of resistance, to turn toward it rather than away. That is the work. It is daily, sometimes excruciating practice of choosing presence over performance. of asking, in the small moments that add up to a life, what is actually true here rather than what version of the truth I should present. To the men who know exactly what I am describing, I know you are out there. I know because the response to this channel has shown me that the experience I am describing is not unusual. It is not the private pathology of one particular man. It is one of the most common and least discussed features of how men are built in this culture, and what that building costs them over time. You know the exhaustion I am talking about, the particular tiredness of a man who has been performing his own life rather than living it, who has been so focused on how he is coming across that he has lost track of what he actually feels, who is genuinely well-liked and genuinely disconnected at the same time, who does everything right by every external measure and still goes to bed most nights with a hollowness that he cannot fully explain. That hollowness is not a mystery. It is the space where the real you has never fully been allowed to live. I want to say something carefully here because I think it is important. The masks you built were not mistakes. They were solutions. They were the best available response to an environment that did not have room for you. They kept you functioning. They kept you connected in the ways that were available to you. They got you here. But here is not where you have to stay. The solutions that serve the child do not have to be what serves the man. The environment has changed even if the response has not yet caught up. And the work of catching up, of building that capability, exists without the mask, and it is available to you. It is not easy, it is not quick, but it is real, and it is possible, and it is the most worthwhile thing I have attempted. You do not have to know what is under your mask before you begin. You just have to be willing to find out, to stay in the room and tolerate the discomfort of being seen without the armor for long enough to discover that being seen does not destroy you. It will not destroy you. I can tell you that from inside the process. It is uncomfortable. It is disorienting, but it does not destroy you. If anything, it is the first thing that has made me feel alive in a very long time. I started this episode with exhaustion. I want to end it with something that has been arriving slowly in the spaces where the exhaustion used to live, and that is relief. There is relief in knowing that the tiredness had a reason, that it was not a character flaw or a weakness or evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with me. It was the response of a man who had been carrying more than one person should carry for longer than one person should carry it. The masks are not gone. I want to be honest about that. But they are lighter than they were. And in the moments when I can put them down, even briefly, what I find underneath is someone I am beginning to want to know. That is more than I had a year ago. And that man has been waiting a long time for someone to finally show up for him. And that someone is me. I am showing up. Slowly, but I am showing up.